You are watching DD, the Defense Dynamics, and I am Danvir Singh, coming to you from New Delhi, connecting to our viewers from India and around the world. Pakistan's top leadership has approved a new military operation named Azm-e-Istehkam, or Resolve for Stability. This is to address the surge in violence and terrorism. In next half an hour, we will try decode what this new operation, Operation Azm-e-Istehkam, is all about. We will tell you those compulsions that have led Pakistani establishment to launch this operation. We will try and figure out if this operation is going to be different from those conducted in the past and how different it is going to be this time. We will flip into the pages of history and find out what has brought Pakistan to this point. And finally, we will also analyze the likely fallouts of this new development in the region, especially on India. Pakistan's army has got its new military initiative approved by their top leadership, and that is the military operation codenamed Azm-e-Istehkam. It is stated to address the surge in violence and terrorism all across Pakistan, especially in the tribal areas of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa.
Pakistan government has given approval for yet another military operation in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. This is not the first military operation. Neither do we know whether it is going to be the last one or not.
The operation comes at a time when intelligence-based counter-terror operations are already underway, particularly in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province and also along the Durand line. These areas include tribal areas of Balochistan as well.
दहशतगर्दी के खिलाफ जंग की जिम्मेदारी रियासत के तमाम इदारों का मुश्तरका फर्ज है और फर्ज अवली है.
Shehbaz Sharif's announcement of Azm-e-Istehkam has raised many questions about its rationale and objectives. Pakistan, Tehreek-e-Insaf and Jamaat-e-Islami Fazl have raised their serious concerns about this new operation.
वो तो नाकामी के अलावा कुछ भी नहीं है, तो क्या एक और मुश्किल में कौम को डालना चाहते हैं, फिर एक दफा खून बहाना चाहते हैं हमारा.
Now, the question about why Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf and Maulana Fazlur Rahman are against this military operation, the answer is simple. Both these political organizations, they have their constituencies in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, and they would not like to have an environment, especially at this point of time when there is so much political instability already going around in the country. So they would not like to have another instability that will affect their governance in a province which already has been battered, mutilated, and had suffered a lot because of terrorism, extremism, and militant organizations.
Pakistani government has said that Azm-e-Istehkam is not a large-scale military operation akin to previous campaigns like Zarb-e-Azm or Rahil-e-Haq. If you recall, viewers, these ops had internally displaced a large population from tribal areas of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, bringing misery and human tragedy at a very, very large scale.
According to the government of Pakistan, this is not going to be any kind of kinetic, large-scale military operation. It is going to be a contained, intelligence-based military operation which will not undertake any displacement of population, one. Two, it is going to be targeted against terrorists, their sleeper cells, like it always happens, and most importantly, it will strengthen the ongoing efforts to combat militancy and extremism.
The Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif had reviewed the country's counter-terrorism operations with a focus on their national action plan before giving his approval. If you recall, This action plan was adopted after December 2014 Peshawar Army Public School attack. It had resulted in 140 deaths, mostly of the students. Now, the larger question is, what is the real reason behind Azm-e-Istehkam? Not only were the Chinese investments in Pakistan under the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor or the CPEC is proving to be a loss-making venture, even the physical security of the Chinese workers in Pakistan is in grave jeopardy. It has been made very clear to the Pakistanis that future Chinese investments were contingent upon Pakistan getting its act together on providing security to the Chinese workers. During Shehbaz Sharif's visit to Beijing last month, despite all the hyperbole that usually accompanies anything to do between China and Pakistan, there was very little outcome in real substantive terms. Speculation has been rife that there is visible cooling off in the bilateral relationship. However, the Chinese seem to be losing interest in at least the economic side of things. Which was supposed to have added a new dimension to the security and strategic relationship when CPEC was initiated 10 years ago. For a couple of years now, the Chinese have been trying to impress upon the Pakistanis that without political stability and security, there was no way that CPEC projects could move forward. This same message was given by Xi Jinping in no uncertain terms during Shehbaz Sharif's recent visit to China. And just a day before the announcement of the new military operation, the visiting Chinese minister Li Jianchao bluntly informed his Pakistani hosts that security threats are the main hazards to CPEC cooperation. In the case of Pakistan, the primary factor shaking the confidence of Chinese investors is the security situation.
China, you came here without our consent, supported our enemies, helped Pakistani military in wiping our villages. But now it's our turn. The motive of our attack was very clear. It was a simple and clear message to China and Pakistan to withdraw immediately.
The Chinese are not giving them any more money. We haven't heard of any new monies being given to Pakistan. At best, what the Chinese are ready to do is roll over previous debts. But there is no new money coming in.
The Chinese for long have been trying to impress upon the Pakistanis that if they are unable to protect Chinese workers, China should be allowed to bring in their own security. But Pakistan has balked at this demand and reiterated assurance of providing complete security to all the Chinese. However, things seems to be reaching a point where Pakistani assurances need to be backed by concrete action on ground. However, things seems to be reaching a point where Pakistani assurances need to be backed by concrete action on ground. This is required not just to satisfy the Chinese, but also to push back the alarming inroads made by the TTP and other armed groups, including the Baluch separatists. With Pakistan's economy in a mess, it desperately needs both foreign and domestic investment. But given the political instability and the deteriorating security situation, neither the domestic nor the foreign investors are ready to invest in Pakistan. However, conducting a large-scale anti-terrorist military operation will not be an easy option for a variety of reasons.
Because the economy is not really picking up, economic difficulties are increasing, and at the same time they've increased the defense budget by something like 18%. If they are getting into a long-winded kind of an operation, the kind of ambitious operation in which they are going to do rehabilitation, economic development, completely refurbishing the judicial system, I don't see how that's going to happen, and do it all when you don't have a public mandate.
Since the year 2007, this is the 12th major anti-terrorist military operation in the region of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. There have been minor ones earlier. However, the most of them were of tactical in nature, focusing on particular area that had become troublesome. Pakistan Army, when it comes to such operations, has a very brutal history of ruthlessness and inflicting extreme violence upon her own very citizens. Not long ago, they had planned and executed one of the most deadliest of the operations in recent times, the Azm-e-Istehkam. This displaced millions of Pakhtuns, razing hundreds of villages and towns to dust.
Almost 1/3 of the Pakistan Army's brigades were employed in Operation Azm-e-Istehkam. And they used every extreme measure to take out the terrorists at that time in the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa area in particular, although the operation was nationwide. To the extent that against terrorists, the use of air power, helicopter gunships, mortars and artillery, that kind of a thing which had never been seen before.
After Azm-e-Istehkam, there was a significant tamping down of terrorism. In the earlier operations, it didn't matter because you carried out an operation in Swat, the guys moved to Bajaur or some other place. You did it in Bajaur, they moved to South Waziristan. You did it in South Waziristan, they moved to North Waziristan. You did it in North Waziristan, they moved to Afghanistan.
The Operation Azm-e-Istehkam was launched on 15th June 2014 in North Waziristan along the Pakistan-Afghanistan border. This was a renewed effort against militancy in the wake of 8th June attack on Jinnah International Airport in Karachi, for which the TTP had claimed the responsibility. As a fallout to these operations, about 1 million people were forced out of their homes, described by Pakistanis as a final push to eradicate the presence of Al-Qaeda, the Taliban and the Islamic movement of Uzbekistan that had plagued the whole of North Waziristan for past 14 years. Thousands of homes and businesses were leveled in airstrikes, artillery and tank bombardment. Pakistani military, which claimed to have killed more than 2,000 terrorists, including hundreds described as foreigners and 0 civilians, later proved to be false. Large number of terrorists managed to cross over into Afghanistan, and the figures of those killed had a large number of civilians in them, basically the Pathans. Ironically, the local Pashtun got caught in the great game with no voice to reason in their favor. Even their own government was using them as a pawn.
Existing 1 million refugees who came, or internally displaced people who came out of Azm-e-Istehkam, all this has added to 4-5 million people. Now, when you have internally displaced people like this floating around, obviously this is a population waiting to be exploited. And all you got to do is bring in some ideological aspects into it and promote more and more radical and extremist ideas in them, and they are always willing to go in for whatever they want.
The United States then warned Pakistan to conduct a ground operation in North Waziristan, but Pakistan was reluctant to do so in that part because the area not only housed groups such as Tehreek-e-Taliban, which targeted the local government, but also the Haqqani network, a group that focused on the insurgency in Afghanistan, whose presence was strategically ignored by the Pakistani military. In the absence of Pakistani ground operations, American drones struck more than 300 times in North Waziristan, killing thousands, many of whom human rights groups and the locals have said were civilians. In the neighboring South Waziristan in 2009, Pakistani troops did carry out large-scale ground offensive. However, it displaced hundreds and thousands of innocent civilians, most of whom have still not returned home. They are the internally displaced persons of Pakistan.
It's not just from that these 1 million people have come out because of Azm-e-Istehkam. There are lots of things concerned here. 3 million Afghan refugees first came from Afghanistan into Pakistan in the 80s. They still have not gone back, all of them. So there are displaced people there. The recent floods in the last 2 years in the Indus have created something like 2 million refugees once again. Those have also added to the numbers.
In other parts of tribal regions of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, thousands have been displaced on multiple occasions since year 2007. As the claims of success by military have turned out to be inaccurate, TTP has gained sympathy and support amongst the locals, and it is on the rise. The local Pakhtuns see them as saviors against the Pakistani military atrocities. The war rages on. Operation Azm-e-Istehkam is going to take place in area of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. But before Khyber Pakhtunkhwa came into place, it was the area of FATA and NWFP. On the far right, in the light green shade, is FATA, the federally administered tribal agency or the area. And the areas in the darker green shade is Northwest Frontier Province. Now, this federally administered tribal areas, commonly known as FATA, this area was a semi-autonomous tribal region in northwestern Pakistan that existed from 1947 onwards until being merged with the neighboring province of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa in 2018. Here the governance was through the tribal elders by Pakhtun code and the Pakhtun Wali. After merger, having lost powers to self-governance, the Pakhtuns of this area felt dishonored. You can say that this was the underlying cause of larger discontent amongst the locals and rising of Pakhtun nationalism. Now let's talk about what this NWFP was. If you look at the map, we have FATA and NWFP marked. Now this province included much of the current Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province, but excluding the federally administered tribal areas. Its capital was the city of Peshawar, and it composed of 6 divisions. 6 divisions, namely Banu, Dera Ismail Khan, Hazara, Kohat, Mardan, Malakan, and the Peshawar division. Now it was in 2010, NWFP province was dissolved, and after the merger with additional areas like Dheer, Chitral and Swat, this complete province was named as Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. So going by the track record of Pakistan Army, the question that we ask, how different this time this operation is going to be?
When Swat, for example, something like 3 to 4 million people had to be pulled out so that they could, carry out these scorched earth operations. They carried that out. They never really compensated people. Rehabilitation left much to be desired. The same thing happened in many of the other places like Bajaur and South Waziristan, North Waziristan. They literally razed towns and villages. Literally. They bombed the hell out of them. It was like, it was like complete war.
Today, Pakistani establishment is unwilling to learn from their past mistakes. They are reinforcing their failures. So these policies are not only a greater threat to whole of the Central Asian region and the South Asian region, but a very great threat to Pakistan herself, her own stability with dangerous fallouts. As the cycle of operation followed by greater terrorism and then thereafter further operations, there is an expanding TTP which comes back with greater vengeance. So now the question is, what are those policies and why has Pakistan come to this situation of being a near failed state? Political theorists would keep splitting hairs as to what factors really constitute towards a failing state. A conventional wisdom would have it that a state which is unable to guard democracy and its political institutions, whose economy has failed, a state that lacks social development and is plagued by sectarian strife is heading towards a failed state status. Pakistan's experiment with democracy can be said to have failed in the first decade of its independence itself, when General Ayub Khan seized political power on October 7, 1958. Pakistan's short history as a country has been very turbulent, fighting amongst the provinces as well as a self-inflicted conflict with India that they have been reinventing with each passing dictator or a civilian leader backed by the military. The civilian leaders have competed with their army generals in proving themselves to be greater hawks when it came to India. The latest case in point being that of Imran Khan. Their fatal obsession with Kashmir has resulted in great turmoil and tension in this region. Pakistan has spent billions of US dollars to fund and fuel terrorism in Kashmir. This has resulted in a drained economy, bringing Pakistan to a verge of near economic collapse. This sole reason has prevented Pakistan from gaining real stability in the last 70 plus decades. It oscillates between the military rule and democratic elected governments.
I request you all to remain calm and support your armed forces in the re-establishment of order to pave the way for a prosperous future for Pakistan.
Between secular policies and Islamization to financial backing as a frontline state like in the Cold War to military cooperation as in the war against terrorism by General Musharraf. It was during General Ziaul Haq's era that radicalization of Pakistani society began. It was aimed to create an unending flow of jihadis to fight the Soviets in Afghanistan and also infiltrate them into India to disturb the peace in this region. This Zia's policy of using terrorism as its foreign policy tool in the region still continues to be in place. This has led to spawning of state-aided madrasas, contributing to religious radicalization in Pakistan society even beyond what Zia would have ever imagined. Alongside the radicalization, political uncertainty adds to instability, creating vacuum which is now being filled by the DTP and other separatist groups at a very faster pace. Recently, the general elections that were held were allegedly rigged to get a favorable government by the military. This underscores the continuing trend of economic and political instability in Pakistan. Pakistan's Defence Minister Asif Khwaja, in his recent interview to a Western media house, had said that Operation Azm-e-Istehkam could be taken inside Afghanistan too, if the need arose.
It is emanating out of the Afghan soil, should be taken care of by our brothers in Afghanistan. And if that is not done, at some point we'll have to, resort to some measures which will definitely, wherever they are, their sanctuaries on Afghan soil, we'll have to hit them. We'll have to hit them.
This threat by Pakistani Defence Minister of launching operations inside Afghanistan has brought a sharp reaction from Afghanistan's interim defense ministry. It has said that anyone who violates our sovereignty under any pretext or title will be responsible for the consequences. Pakistan's defense minister's statement about the possibility of violating Afghanistan's national sovereignty are an ill-considered act and an attempt to muddy the waters, which is not in anyone's interest. The leadership of Pakistan must not allow anyone to make such sensitive statements on sensitive issues. An analysis of the past with no changes to the unholy governing structure of Pakistan Army generals and Islamic fundamentalists, Pakistan presents not only a serious danger to regional security as such, but also a greater human crisis within its borders. It is unlikely that this operation, Operation Azm-e-Istehkam, will get Pakistan any stability. On the contrary, it will add to greater instability. This is what the history has suggested. In fact, Pakistan Army should learn how India has been conducting people-friendly operations, winning hearts and minds of the people.
Pakistan has a history of using kinetic power, extreme kinetic power, to get rid of terrorists, neutralize terrorists. This is what they've done in the past in the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa area. This is what they're going to do again. Compare this to the manner in which India has done it in Jammu and Kashmir. We have never used the Indian Air Force. We have used the helicopters only to lift troops to certain areas in the mountains. That's about all. Never have we fired a helicopter gunship. Ours has been a typical benign kind of an approach to use limited kinetic power, but balanced tremendously by soft power. Our balance between kinetic and operations and soft power has been very intense, very, very focused. That's the strength of the Indian system.
And before we conclude, here is my take. Pakistan has a history of engaging in others' wars in exchange for billions of US dollars in aid. The recent announcement of Operation Azm-e-Istehkam suggests little change in outcomes that from the past. Already teetering on the brink of economic collapse, Pakistan risks further alienating its tribal population. Exacerbated by its pro-Chinese policies that have already soured relations with local tribals, this operation is likely to compound rather than mitigate these issues. Instead, Pakistan could benefit from studying India's approach to insurgency, emphasizing on people-friendly tactics. Regionally, the neighboring countries must remain vigilant to proactively manage any potential fallout within their borders. And with this, we come to the end of this episode. I take this opportunity to thank you all for overwhelming support to our previous episode on India's light combat helicopter Prachand. See you next week with new story, and thanks for watching. But before that, don't forget to post your comments on social media with hashtag DD with Danvir. Goodbye and take care.